Welcome to Healthcare Simplified, a podcast from DeliverHealth. Nothing's inherently simple about healthcare. That's why on Healthcare Simplified, we explore with today's top health leaders how to maximize ROI, staff satisfaction, and public health outcomes by building greater efficiencies into the healthcare connections that matter most between clinicians and technology, providers and patients, and people and their health. I'm your host, Mitch Holdick. Let's put simplicity to work together.
Hi, this is Debra Voss. I am a solution consultant in digital health and patient experience at DeliverHealth. And today I am excited to be speaking with Jean Hitchcock, who is the president of Hitchcock Marketing and Communications. Welcome, Jean.
Thanks, Deb. Thank you. Nice to be here.
So we want to have a discussion today, Jean, about marketing, healthcare, digital marketing, and what's happening in the industry. So can you give us a little bit of a background on where you focus in the marketing space, and then we'll move more into digital health?
Okay, I'll try to combine those areas because they should be combined. I think in the past, there was an understanding that IT owned digital, but as digital has become the front door for consumers, I always put the marketing people, anything that touches a consumer, marketing needs to sign off on. So, a lot of organizations have formed digital governance committees, which has IT, legal, risk, service line people, and marketing people for that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
God love the developers who develop the code, but sometimes it's not user friendly. And so that's where we come in and do a value add. I think another thing that has come up lately is the remote work. That digital people now, there's no need for them to come in. And so when you do recruitment, you're recruiting nationally. And that's a big change from the way it was maybe 5 years ago before COVID. And then lastly, I think the use of digital and how marketing can enhance things like recruitment is an untapped resource, as well as fundraising. Foundation work and development work using digital tools is an area that only a few health systems have really gotten into. And I think that's a real area of opportunity.
I think that's fascinating. Here at the SHSMD conference, I've been hearing a number of people speak about how the Great Resignation is impacting everybody, not just physicians, nurses, but also marketing teams, IT teams. What are you seeing? Is that a trend that is existing out there? You just mentioned it around recruitment. What do you see as sort of the opportunity and the challenges around marketing and the focus today?
I'm not sure what this Great Resignation is. I don't know where everybody went, number one. Number two, what has happened is we've become very involved in recruitment right now. We're using all the social media outlets. We have actually hired nurses to be influencers, to get on social media, to promote organizations, for the hard to place folks like those OR nurses that are so tough. Because we're no longer competing with our competitor down the street. We're competing with every hospital in the United States. So we've really taken the brand to social media. We do a lot of innovative virtual fairs and things like that. And that's all new for HR. HR has never really been involved to that degree, but they're enjoying it and they're getting good results.
Great. I also want to go back to something that you said about the technology and marketing and that we have this blend happening, right? Where does digital health sit today in healthcare systems? Where do you think it should sit?
Well, when you say digital health, are you talking about digital marketing?
Digital innovation and accountability for digital engagement.
Okay. I think when you come to places like SHSMD or HCIC or the Forum and you see all the new vendors that are in spaces that didn't even exist 10 years ago, you can see that people have really taken the patient journey to a full extent. And they're looking at what do consumers want? And what we want is as easy an experience as we have on Amazon. Is it realistic? No, but that's what we want. Banking was one of the most entrenched industries. They've finally come around, right? So for healthcare, and I've been doing this a while, there was a time when we actually would have arguments about whether patients should have access to their own data. Because how could they interpret it? And I was one of those people who was behind consumerism a long time ago. That's how I got into healthcare. And I said, it's their data. Why can't they have their own data? It's not like they're going to be prescribing drugs for themselves or something, right? So you fast forward now and people want to be able to access their charts, make appointments, do all that stuff. They need the convenience. So when you talk about the merging, it's operations, right? Because we can make the prettiest digital door ever, but if operations can't make it happen, it's not going to happen. And then data. We're drowning in data. So you need IT to help you identify what data streams you need to ingest, how they're to ingest, all under HIPAA, all under protected patient, So it's a total blend. I mean, we've come so far from where anyone thought it was their thing, We all have a role in it, operations, IT, and marketing.
And from your perspective, Jean, with that intersection that exists, obviously marketing teams today are engaged in these technological decisions. Can you provide any guidance on that in terms of how marketing should be involved, what their role should be, what they may need to focus on or learn with respect to identifying the best technology strategies?
I still have scars from a couple of assignments I had where IT wanted to control the RFP process from start to finish. And what I would say to them is, I don't want to waste your time talking to vendors who can't provide what I need. So you negotiate a middle ground. You say, listen, let me put together what I call minimum requirements. Let me screen them. And then when we get down to 4, you come to the table and you can ask all your security questions, everything you need to know. And I've changed a little bit now. Now I give them the security checklist. If they can't get past that, they're not getting in the door at all. But now IT is appreciating the fact that they're not spending an inordinate amount of time on vendors who aren't even going to be considered. So it's a little bit of a negotiation, depending on how rigid, your organization is. But what we did with CRM, for example, is we really started the conversation with CRM vendors before we brought in IT, before they even knew we were talking to vendors, because we wanted to clear the road. So we were only talking to the ones that we really wanted to talk to.
Interesting. If you look at digital today, what would you say are some of the greatest opportunities that we have in the space today? And what are some of the big challenges that we have?
Well, the challenges always are the ones you remember because of the ones you're dealing with every day. But content, keeping it current, is always a challenge, particularly when you're with a health system. You've got so many service lines and things like that. So content. So you need to have a system to constantly update your front doors, whether it's your apps, your website, your intranet, whatever it is. But content is always difficult. The second piece is just because a bright, shiny penny comes down the road, you need to have the discernment to know whether it's going to work for you. Right now, I'm working at a children's hospital. What works for kids and their families is very different than works for a 54-year-old woman who's been having knee pain in an adult system. And you need to know that. How the kids get to you in a pediatric system is very different than how adults come into systems. So you need to know that. So when a vendor says that we're doing this at such and such, well, that's fine, but that's not my market. Let me see if it can work for me. The marketers have to really put their brains on as to what's it going to do to enhance the patient experience, increase volumes, and engage the patient.
Excellent. Do you think that we have any particular innovations that are happening that you'd like to talk about? Digital health or other?
Innovations. Well, the big buzzword from everything I get in all my news feeds is artificial intelligence, and how is that going to use? And people want to talk about bots, chat bots and things like that. It just depends on where you are, the tools you have, and what makes sense. I'm working with a client now who doesn't have a call center. So it's really hard to entertain a CRM that goes through a call center connectivity into your EHR if you don't have one, right? So that wouldn't even be a possibility for me. I do not think my current client is at a point where we have bots, but then guess what happened? The bots were going into our scheduling area and they couldn't handle the calls. So the bots came down. You got to be ready. You got to be ready all the way around to handle some of these innovations. So right now, I'm just building the foundation and getting the building blocks in place so that no matter which direction they go in, they've got what they need.
And so what are some of those foundations we need, especially to drive a good digital experience?
How about a Find a Doc system that actually works and has all the aspects of it that they should have in it, right? They want to know the insurance. They want to know what language they speak. And if they're located in 2 or 3 locations, can I schedule at that location at that time? I can do that with my car. I can do that with my vet. Why can't I do it with my doctor, right? You got to have a search function that's intuitive. It can't lock on to otolaryngology. It's got to also know that that's ENT, Stanford's got a phenomenal search engine that they designed themselves that they've offered to share with us, and we're going to bring it to our pediatric hospital. But search is critical. Mobile display. It has to work on mobile. That's where people are at, and it has to be intuitive. How many of us will read an article and then when it makes you sign in, you say, forget it, I'm not doing it. People feel the same way about healthcare websites. They got to be able to get all around it and don't make it tough. And so the nomenclature you use to name things is important. Find a doc is critical. And then the last one, which is even more critical in my opinion right now, is the careers page. I mean, you've got to be able to track people coming in, who was hired, how they came in. You have to have a whole understanding of that journey for that person, which is different than the patient.
Interesting. You talked a little bit before about governance. Obviously, we're speaking about how important it is for marketing to be engaged in different ways and cross over with operations, with technology. What have you seen as some of the best practices with respect to governance structure and where marketing plays that role?
Well, when I was the CMO at MedStar Health, we formed a governance group there, and it really was well done. And I'd be happy to share with anybody sort of how we did it. But we had all the representatives because we all have the doctors that raised their hand and said, I saw this app. What about this? So it became the clearinghouse for that sort of stuff. Not that the group decided on apps, but we knew where to farm it and we kept track of what people were bringing in, et cetera. Access was a big issue. So our goal for the governance committee was how do we enhance access? That was one of our guiding principles. And that was access for patients or applicants, right? So you've got to have that sort of a guiding principle for a group like that because it's such a broad field, they could get lost in it. And then risk and legal, this whole thing with the cookies and everything else that's going on, you got to have them at the table. And I'm fortunate, at least at the pediatric hospital I'm at right now, we have a legal person who came out of marketing. So he's been just a wonderful help for us.
It's great. So with all of that, I know there's a lot of progress that we're making in digital health, but I think some gaps also exist today. Do you see that in terms of clients you work with? What are some of those gaps and what could they be doing maybe to simplify some things?
Well, it's a great question. There's a couple of influences. Some are under our control, some aren't. There was a great consolidation in CRM, for example, recently, and then there was a great disruption in CRM. And a lot of my clients are dealing with that, right? The other thing is sometimes the vendors have created products that are far beyond what most health systems are at. My comment about the call center, if you don't have a call center, some of these aren't going to work, So people have to have a really grounded understanding about, digital tools can get you to hit a wall at 400 miles an hour. It'll get you there faster. But if you haven't figured out the operations, it could be a mess. People really need to put themselves in the seat of the consumer and how the consumer is working. The other gaps is the talent gap. I mean, some of these digital folks can command any salary they want, and they're hard to find. And they're hard to find ones that can think expansively. They might know one thing well, but you need somebody who's an integrator who understands you got to bring data in from different places and what story you need to tell. I am a current MedStar Health patient, and I think their Find a Doc is very good. I think Stanford Search is fabulous. I think Benioff's Children's Hospital has done a great job of making a scary situation not scary for kids and their families, things like that. On the career side, somebody needs to really come in there and disrupt it. And there's a company in Baltimore that I used to do some work with that did this deep data search on who's successful from a turnover perspective, who would be the ideal candidate for your company. Very few healthcare systems look at it that way. They're trying to fill spot A, spot B. This company was looking at this group of people would be the most likely to succeed in your organization based on the experience of your current employees. That's the kind of futuristic approach I think we need to take. And not very many people have. The company that I'm talking about, their most common client are long-term care centers.
Oh, interesting.
Which should come into healthcare.
Absolutely.
So
same with home health. I'm hearing a lot about digital around remote patient monitoring, ways to keep people connected who are outside the walls of the hospital. Do you have any insights there around what you're seeing, any trends?
Well, I'm actually sitting on a board that does that for animals. It's a company that does telemedicine visits for dogs, along with a lot of other things. And somebody might say, well, how do you do that? Well, personally, it's a way to triage to see whether the dog is very sick or the animal is sick or whatever. And they immediately put you in touch with a vet within 5 miles of where you live. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that is just on the horizon. That is great. So you get the triage piece. They send the information to the closest vet if you don't have one, and then you take the animal there.
So looking to other industries, it sounds like is something we also should be thinking about.
Well, I got to tell you, the best hire I ever made was a gal who came to me from Family Dollar. They have 8,000 stores around the United States. So retail, you can learn a lot from. And she has brought, she knew nothing of healthcare at all. She's a quick learner, but I mean, her experience in retail really helped us in healthcare, and it's been amazing.
And now that you mentioned retail, this is what I'm hearing. Across the country, some areas are focused on this, some are not, but this retail health, the expansion of it, the growth, the Amazons, the CVSs. What's your take on all of that? And is that impacting digital marketing in hospitals today and how they're approaching things?
Well, that's a great question, because I have to tell you, I am blown away by the efficiency of my Walgreens. I have gotten all my vaccinations. They remind me when it's time for my next one. I mean, they are killing it. They're doing such a great job. I've been in the business long enough to know that when urgent cares came into town and wanted to co-brand with local health systems, the health system I was with at the time said, oh no, urgent care is never going to fly. It flew really well. And so now we're in the business of urgent care, But I will tell you also, when I was in Michigan in the 90s, we had comments from our doctors saying your urgent care shouldn't be open when our offices are open. And we're saying that assumes that everyone has a doctor. And if the kid is sick early in the morning and your office doesn't open till 9. So we fought that battle in the 90s. I'm in Arizona now, and after hour urgent care for pediatrics is only offered after office hours. So it just depends on the market. But
interesting.
I think we're going to go to 24-hour urgent care, obviously.
Yeah, there's a lot going on with the competition with what retail health can bring. And I think it's challenging systems to rethink what they're doing. And with that, I know a lot of systems have invested in a number of really great solutions for digital health, but they still tend to be very fragmented. Lots of great point solutions out there in the market space. Do you have any perspective or any advice for hospitals that are looking for a particular solution or how to think about all of those different things that they need?
Well, it goes back to what are you trying to achieve, right?
Okay.
So if you're down here in the development of your foundation for digital health, you're not going to be able to go up here and be successful. You got to get there, So
staging and phasing.
And if what your goal is to make it very convenient for people who are not acutely ill to access care, that's one thing. If what you're talking about is a chronic illness with people and getting care that are going to be with you for the rest of your life, that's a different pathway. And you just got to be clear about what you're trying to achieve.
Interesting. So as people have this wealth of, things to look at, to use, to deploy for digital health, how is it that they could or should go about simplifying it? Because I think many people feel very overwhelmed about everything that's out there. Do you have any advice on simplifying the way that we approach digital health?
Good question. I'd be the first person to tell you that every time I go to HCIC, half the vendors are new. I mean, the products change over that much. What I have found to be the most effective is I will call a colleague with a similar system and say, tell me what you're using and why. And recently I was on a phone call with Boston, Washington, Omaha, and Phoenix about an issue around pediatric care. What flies in Boston and New York doesn't fly in Omaha and Phoenix. So again, you've got to know your market, you've got to know the size of your organization, and you got to know what your competitors are putting out there. So you do your due diligence about your market, and then you find somebody who's similar to that, and you start testing out what are they doing and how did they get there, et cetera, et cetera. I have found people in healthcare to be the most generous people in the world. They are more than willing to share their lessons learned.
That's great. And for today's, sort of market and what's going on, there are some today that haven't really gotten on the digital health bandwagon yet. Is there anything that you'd like to say about the importance of that or, that perspective? Like if someone hasn't started today, what do you think, they should be looking to do or thinking about?
I can't imagine anybody isn't into digital health. Maybe there are. They're going against the grade of what consumers want. They're going to be at a disadvantage from a competitive standpoint. If they're not into it because of fear, hesitancy, they need to get over that. They're not going to grow their organization. They're just not. And it's kind of like the internet. Before the internet, how did we do things? Well, we're in a different age. Use the tools that are out there. Don't shy away from them.
Yeah, sounds great. Well, Jean, I really appreciate this conversation today and the insights that you've shared with us. For our listeners out there, if they'd like to connect with you, what would be the best way for them to get a hold of you?
My email is Jean, Jean, at Hitchcock, like Alfred, marcom.com. So Jean at hitchcockmarcom.com. And my cell phone is 858-349-2384. And yes, that's a San Diego exchange because it reminds me of the sun in San Diego when I worked at Scripps.
Great. Thank you for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
Thanks again for tuning in. If you like what you heard, please share, rate, and review on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting platform. For more content about simplifying healthcare, visit deliverhealth.com/resources, where you'll find our blog, videos, and much more. We'll see you next time on Healthcare Simplified.